closest to where you are sat, and then the people online can hear you. I'm sure they'll shout up if you forget, and then press it again to.
Right, can we start? Welcome everybody. You notice you've got the reserve today. I apologise. Oliver's away, so I'm chairing in his absence. Any declarations of interest over and above normal? I'll take silence as none. Thank you very much. Minutes of the meeting on the 24th of January. Are they okay for accuracy? Okay, I'll take that as sent. And anything to pick up on the action log? Well, there's anything we need to pick up on the action log? I didn't think there was, but no. It's okay. Which one's that, Angela? Sorry. Agenda. Oh, and the creative health strategy. Yeah, we did say we'd confirm a date. Okay, you're right. Thank you. Kathy, I know you're on. If you can pick that up. I think it was in your bailiwick.
We do have a date for the South Yorkshire Creative Health Board. I think it's the 16th of April, and we're liaising with Mariana for a development session on creative health as well. So okay. That's in hand, Pierce.
David?
As I understand it, and that's a great idea, that there'll be one rep from each local authority on that board. Will somebody get in touch with us sometime soon, and we know who we want our rep to be, and say, can you put forward a name?
Okay, is that okay, Kathy? Thank you.
Yeah, that's
David,
great. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, questions from members of the public? I don't think we had any. No. Okay, brilliant. So we move on to item 5. We've talked a lot about the Safe Place to Sleep programme. Andy, you're coming along to talk us through it. Hiya, welcome. Nice to see you.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. Yeah, I struggle over safe space to sleep, and all versions thereof, or beds for babies, as the mayor was really keen, and right so to brand it. So yeah, we as a partnership have discussed the genesis of a safe space to sleep programme for a while. At the Mayoral Combined Authority meeting on the 12th of March, the board formally approved the allocation of £2.2 million to do 3 things around a safe space to sleep for children in South Yorkshire. One of those was to tackle a here and now issue, which was there are too many families in South Yorkshire who aren't able, for a host of reasons, to offer a safe space to sleep for their children aged 0 to 5. So we're going to put in place the funding in order to tackle that sort of unmet demand as it is here and now. And we'll be doing that with a VCSE organisation who will work across South Yorkshire, and with a whole host of referral organisations in South Yorkshire. We're also, though, wanted, and this has been something driving our work all the way through, is explore and deliver 4 test and learn pilots in parts of South Yorkshire to unpick some of the kind of wider challenges and issues leading to the issue that presents itself around children not having a safe space to sleep. Those areas are sort of set out in the paper, and colleagues in local authorities particularly will be aware of those. So we will inject some capacity to support the delivery of those. And then the third bit is evaluation, making sure that we take the learnings from the work and understand how we build a potential investment case to continue the work that we're all keen to do, which is shift more resources into prevention. And the evidence base that we hope will be driven by this is that these sorts of interventions save you money in the long run. And you might want to hypothecate some of that money, invest in it all in the early years. That'd be the ambition. So we're really pleased to have secured the approval through the Mayoral Combined Authority. The hard bit is turning it into a delivery programme. But that's the next job now. We've got the funding in the bank. And I'll stop there, Chair.
Thank you, Andy. Really helpful. A couple of things for me, and we'll have other questions. I actually think there are 2 difficult bits. One is I absolutely agree, making this a practical program that delivers. I don't think we should underestimate the scale of measurement, of the challenge of measurement of this. One of the challenges we have generally in health inequality issues, and it's why I don't think we've done enough on it, all of us, is measuring the impact. So we can say, actually did make this difference. And I've measured it, and this is what difference it made on that family, what difference it made on that community. And actually, I think we find that very challenging. So there's something for me about getting a robust delivery of safe place to sleep, and then really finding ways of measuring it really effectively in the short and long term. Because I think some short term things we can measure as well as some long term stuff. So I don't underestimate the challenge of that, but really helpful.
Thanks, Andy. I know that we've talked about this and we've talked about the evaluation. And I know you've got a robust plan around evaluation. I guess for me, I've got a slightly different ask around this, and I really welcome being able to see what comes out of evaluation and really get into how do we use that, because actually this is a kind of crisis direct response to something that urgently needs to be addressed. It's the next stage of what do we do with that, and I'd really welcome sort of being able to kind of understand that and get into a conversation quite soon, actually, because we do need to sort of attach that planning. And I think that that's why it's right that it's come to this board, because it does need to be attached to what we're doing around health inequalities and wanting to move upstream into prevention.
So this is a different but allied point. I mean, I think this is probably quite a significant paper for us, right? In the context of this board, because this board is probably has sponsored this work all the way through, and has emerged out of the conversations we had around the integrated care strategy, and we brought the system together to think differently about this space, and that's what we've done. And the likes of Andy and Will and others, and on this in this meeting have done that work, and to get to the stage now where actually we've made we've got a framework to do stuff, and we've talked in the past about how can we move more significantly into the space of doing stuff rather than writing about stuff, and to actually have put £2.2 million of investment behind this proposition based upon the work that's been done is a significant step for this board. And you're absolutely right. What it does is then open up the next subsequent conversation about not just about the delivery, but the evaluation, where we go to next with this. And I think actually as a sort of like tracker through what we've done as a board, I think it's a significant piece of work. Actually, it's an exemplar. That's the way I would describe it.
I think that's right. Chris?
Yeah, so I mean, we are getting a lot of attention from outside of South Yorkshire doing this, and it's been incredibly brave for people to. I mean, we have got evidence, but we're building evidence, aren't we? So there is a leap of faith here, isn't there? So we're having do that. I don't want to embarrass Andy, but Andy's been leading the team working on this, and he's done an amazing job. And it's been a year's work getting there. So I think just to recognise that, and it's a very complex pattern of partnership working. So it's been done well to get to this point. The challenge now for the team who are working on it is to do the delivery, but the evaluation and then what's the business proposition beyond that is the next stage, isn't it?
Yeah, just a couple of things, if I may, and just building on those two things. And because I think this, I mean, I think this is a bit of a success, really, because actually it's only about 12 months ago that we started. And I think I just wanted to go back to something that is absolutely implicit in the paper, but it's probably not that obvious. This is about health inequalities. So this was sponsored by the Mayor, sponsored by the Integrated Care Partnership, to help us think differently about how we really do something differently about health inequalities, recognising that it's really hard to affect some change. And it's one of the challenges that we had as an Integrated Care Board right at the outset, which is, well, what's going to be different then? So with the support, we worked through that, and our fundamental question or problem was actually how do we affect some change around health inequality, which took us to children and young people, which is our bold ambition one. So this is us trying to affect some change in that space, but affect it together. The other point I wanted to make, because I think it's absolutely implicit, but not necessarily drawn out in the paper, is a really fundamental thing that as a group we're really recognised as being really important in this space, which is trusted relationships. So whilst there are some really practical things that we're absolutely trying to get behind, so the practical thing of not having a safe space to sleep or even something to sleep in, there is something implicit within this, which is why the focus is in those 4 sites, which is why it's about working with communities and the voluntary sector and others. It's about how do we get much closer to, you know, where the challenges are so we can really understand them to support and affect some change.
Yes, thank you. And I agree with what's been said. However, I am just worried about having measurements, and because it's a very short period of time and you can't really measure the impact on initiatives on inequalities in the short term. And I think that's, you know, something that we really need to bring into the open, because whilst the national NHS targets, you know, are upon us from above, on the ground, we know that these are really important changes that make a difference, but they don't make a difference within 2 years. These are generational changes. This is giving children a better life chance. We know that those first 5 years of life are fundamental to the development of a child's brain. So sometimes we need to do things because they are the right things to do, peers, not because we can measure the impact within 2 years. And I think we have to say loudly, I think it's important that we have a pilot and we measure and we track changes, but also what happens after? What do we do if the data doesn't say what we're expecting it to say? Do we change tack, or do we just persevere and we still fund it? Or do we give up? Because what's the point of spending £2.2 million if it doesn't do what we want to do in a very short period of time, which we know is not going to happen? Then it's just wasted money. It's just, you know, something on a brochure to say, oh, we've done this really amazing project. I think we need to be brave and stick to it.
Any other points? Jason, sorry, Jason.
Yeah, so I think partly to answer your question, Andrew, I think, you know, I agree, we won't be able to show the change in health inequalities, but hopefully we'll be able to get some fantastic patient stories. And actually, that's something that we can be very strong on. If we can find some patient stories in there that what happens to the people who we're providing for, then that might well be helpful.
Yes, Paul.
But will we still fund it just with the patient stories? So is this patient story going to be enough for, you know, the targets that we have? Because that's really important. That's why I think we need to be brave and we need to stick to our guns. If this is really something that we want to do and we want to make life better for children 0 to 5, we need to say we don't care what we're told from above. We're going to do this because we know it's right and we know that the change is going to come maybe in 10 years time, 20 years time, because these children are going to do better at school. They're going to have better life chances. Their health is going to be better. And therefore, that is all fitting in with our agenda in the long term.
Okay, I've got 2 people out the room first who I've missed. So I've got Sheena and then Nigel. Sheena, and then I'll come back to you, sorry. And then yourself, Ellen, as well. Sheena.
Thanks, Piers. I think Nigel might have been before me, but anyway, I'll carry on if that's all right, Nigel. So I just wanted to say a couple of things. I think it's a great update for the board as well, for the partnership, given that we've been talking about this for a little while now, and it's some real tangible kind of delivery now. I think I just wanted to say something around the test and learn in the 4 pilot areas. So, you know, just to give some kind of assurance to colleagues around the table that this work has already started. So particularly in Goldthorpe, in Barnsley, which is the one that I've been involved in, we've already met a couple of times. We've got another session very shortly, and that's really starting to pull together lots of organisations who are working in this space, who are doing really good work already. And this is about bringing it all together in a much more you know, collegiate, supportive way, so that families don't drop through the gaps as well, really. So building on that, developing that approach around the trusted relationships, I think it's been really effective and everyone's been really excited by it. And building on lots of good work that's already happening around, you know, kind of effective measures around making sure children and young people have got opportunities to have safe spaces to sleep, because there's been a lot of work in that area already. And I don't think we've ever wanted to say that that hasn't been good, effective work. I think it was about building on that. And I think that's what's happening in those test and learn pilots. So being able to understand the impact of that, I think will be really critical, really. But some good work happening. And just wanted to say again, following on from Chris's point about Andy's work, because he's a bit of an unsung hero. He sits in the background doing all this kind of work, really, but he's been really instrumental in making sure that this has been driven, which is what has been absolutely required when everybody's got busy day jobs doing other things. So thanks very much, Andy. You take a lot of credit for this. You should do.
Thank you. Nigel, then Alexis, then Eleanor.
Yeah, just a couple of queries. Cheers, Pete. Piers, on this. I mean, clearly it's you know, it's a really good, obviously, program stroke project in terms of dealing with the roots in terms of obviously poverty, inequality, and needs to be obviously applauded. Sheena, to some extent, has dealt with one of the queries, because one of my concerns was going to be around how the project sort of like interacts with already existing services and organisations that are on the ground already delivering some of these. And I mean, I've got some reassurance that the ones particularly in Doncaster, which is Mexborough, I'm guessing that contact's already been made. And these organisations are sort of like fully briefed on obviously what's happening, you know. The second point I wanted to make is just around, I suppose, how these get to know, I suppose, some understanding around how these pilot areas were chosen across South Yorkshire, because I think we need to understand that in terms of obviously relative deprivation and the areas. And the third point really is around my assumption is that obviously the organisations that we are working with went through a transparent procurement process for the actual contract. I'm hoping that that is the case.
Number of detailed points there. I'll come back to Andy on some of that, but let me just hear some other views first, Nigel, but I'll make sure Andy comes back. Is that okay? I've got Alexis and I've got Eleanor, if you still didn't know whether you still wanted to raise something. Alexis.
But really helpful paper, really supportive of this, particularly the focus on health inequalities. A couple of key points. I think there's something about taking the learning, but also informing wider sustainability across a number of things, because I think there's something in here about this could be cut up in a single agenda. There's actually learning could be cascaded, I thought, in multiple agendas. For me, I think this also links into wider programmes such as Homewards that was launched on last week. And I've got this as an AOB for today. There's actually a couple of things for AOB to link to that. Because actually I think this programme could link into things like Homewards, which is about ending homelessness, sponsored by the Royal Foundation. But there's also things like Changing Futures programmes. And so for me, it's about how do we link this into already a wide range of programmes that's going on, so it's not seen on its own. And I think that could be quite a helpful way to support it in the longer term. Final point for me is actually about, to some degrees, if I think it's from a different angle, there's also about what's the responsibility on wider agencies to identify children who might be at risk of not having a safe place to sleep. Because I look at this from a point of view of actually you might have a number of agencies in the room who will not be actually working with children. There might be adult focused services, but they'll come across families in which children are affected. So for me, the question is actually how are we broadening this out? How are we making sure that wider agencies are actually bought into this as well? And I think that's quite a powerful thing, because it's more likely that actually you'll have the identification through a range of routes. So I think that to me is a kind of a key thought, and particularly I think if that could be brought into the evaluation. Final point for me is in terms of equalities. I think it's it's interesting the areas being picked. That wouldn't be necessarily my first areas. It's certainly some of the areas I think about, particularly in Sheffield. And I think for me the question is how are we ensuring diversity is thought into this? Inclusion and equalities, and particularly communities who are particularly seldom heard. And so for me, there's a question about how are we learning, particularly from communities that might not be as in the focus, and taking that forward, particularly from inequalities. Or think about health inequalities, kind of need to focus on inequalities, particularly those that are seldom heard as well.
Can I just ask Eleanor to raise her point, and I go back to Andy in the group who might want to answer a number of the points that have been raised. Eleanor.
Oh, I'm sorry. Thank you. Step on from what Angela had said, actually totally agree. And I think I'd read a longer version of this paper where the evaluation seemed really ambitious. And I would sort of mirror what Angela said, probably too ambitious. you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot before you started. However, assuming this is successful in 2 years' time, I just want to talk about the money. Same thing about the money then, because I think if this is successful, it won't be the first piece of work, really good work, that's successful. I'm aware of 2 this very week, based on published evidence, co-producing communities, positive stories coming out of it, logic models to show savings, and they've got no funding. And that's not 2.2 million, those are like 250,000 each. And we're just saying, so I suppose my question is, when are we going to start having the discussion about shifting some finance to make these things sustainable?
I agree. Andy, can you answer some of those points, and we'll bring up some of the broader points after? Is that okay?
I certainly won't be answering the last one. But I'm very interested in the answer the board gets to. So there's loads in there. Just really quick on evaluation. So Helen and colleagues in the voluntary sector and local authorities have been really helpful in us shaping our evaluation strategy. And we will be going out to market to what I am not going out to market for an evaluation company to do is just to kind of do a numbers piece of work. We allocated a significant chunk of the resource and some challenge internally around why are you allocating such a large amount to evaluation when you could be buying cots, cribs, and baskets. And it's because it's really important. It will include a really strong social evaluation strand and the storytelling. So it will not, I suspect, tell us the answer that you do this, it saves you loads of money and you just invest. So those points are well taken and but also really well made. In terms of Councillor Ball's point, I think really good question about how we got to the places we chose. And I can't show you a scientific, methodological, sound approach to do it. And that is deliberate, because the work that the group did was identify that you have to work with places that want to work with you. So we could have chosen a set of places based on the worst deprivation stats or worst health inequality stats. Sometimes they marry, sometimes they don't. So that was a lens through which we decided which places we wanted to work with. But the other lens was, is that place up for trialing something and piloting something? Is there some capacity already in that place? For example, a family hub. And secondly, we also left it open to our local places to determine where those places came from. So it was a bit of science, a bit of judgment, and a bit of pick a place that wants to do it. Because if you've got those 3 conditions, you probably stand a slightly better chance of success. Procurement, I can assure you, we're in good shape in terms of the process by which we will be allocating the funding. Mayoral Combined Authority is a pretty transparent, pretty safe pair of hands in terms of spending money. So kind of assure people we're in good shape on that. I think probably the only other point I'd make about evaluation actually is we're leaving it fairly open so we can be flexible and connect it into other programs that are in existence that may also be evaluating on similar timeframes. So I'm looking at CYP and Nick might want to come in on that, because we've left it deliberately open because people said don't be overly prescriptive. So I'll let Nick come in on that.
I'm going to talk about it in my slides, so I won't take any more time, but I'm definitely going to show that interconnectivity of the work that we're doing. Yeah.
Any other points?
It's just brilliant. It's just great. And whilst the evaluation on health inequality is really important, I think what makes it really brilliant is that we are investing in a basic human need, not to lose that at a really strategic level in the region, investing in a basic human need. It's just great. The question that I had is around the 2.2 million, and I can get a sense from the paper, and it may have been in previous papers, around how much of the ambition will that hit? So if the ambition is that everyone gets a bed, how much will the 2.2 million touch that? Do we know yet?
So I could come up with a kind of answer that satisfied a public forum, but if I'm perfectly honest, we don't know. We genuinely don't know the scale of demand out there. We have some idea from the waiting list that exists, the kind of sort of demand we know about, but when you go public with an announcement like this, it absolutely could lift the lid off in terms of demand. that I think one of the, and you will see in the public messaging that we've been really clear that this is about referrals from a trusted organisation, whether that's your GP, community midwife, or early years setting. So it's not just to kind of pick up the phone, speak to Andy Gates in the Simca, and he'll get you a sort of hot crib Moses basket delivered. And that was deliberately not to limit demand, but to make sure that if a family needs that kind of support, that they are plugged into a support network, whether that's a public, statutory, private, or anything in between agency to provide that kind of support. But long way of saying, I have no idea. I hope the resources we've allocated will deliver over actually the 4 years, but who knows?
Thank you.
Hi, it's Rachel from Public Health in Doncaster. It's great when the colleagues in the room do the public health and health inequalities bit for you. So my bit is more around the environment sustainability bit. So this is potentially, hopefully, a lot of things, a lot of products, and thinking about the social value opportunity around that, maybe opportunities to work with businesses around their corporate social responsibility, but also around waste as well. So what happens at the end of the life cycle of that cot, baby bed, whatever it is. So would really be interested in how that's built in as well, and see that there's a named voluntary community sector organisation, and I think you've answered some of this as well, but how do we ensure that all of our voluntary community sector organisations that can play a role with this will already have those trusted relationships, can play that part and build on those relationships that they've already got?
Thanks, Rachel. Anyone else got any other points? Okay, couple of points I'd want to make. I think this is a really important development. It's an important development for 2 or 3 different reasons. One is it's the first time as an ICP we've done something like this, and secondly is quite consciously it was done in a very different way than normal. It wasn't a statutory agency suddenly set it up or someone had a good idea. We actually started to say what might make a difference rather than what's the good idea we've got. I actually think that's a really important bit of process. And so, you know, I think this is an exceptionally important step, as well as being a really important initiative in the first place. So I'd like to thank all the group who are involved in it. I'll thank Andy again, because everyone's thanked you, Andy. But I think there was a lot of people who worked on this, because I know some of them. And actually, they kept coming back to me, and I said, why that? But actually, it really makes a difference. This could make a difference, both in what it does on the ground, but in teaching us to work differently. That might be the most powerful bit of this, you know, that we work differently because of it. So really great scheme. Thank you very much, Andy and everybody involved. Thank you. Can we move on to agenda item 6 then, the Children and Young People Alliance? Nicola, are you taking me through this?
Yes, thanks, Pierce. So thanks everybody. I've got some slides to share as I talk through this. In preparing for speaking today and sharing some of the work we're doing, I thought I'd look back to when I was last year, so that was 10 months ago, in this space, just telling people a little about where the CBIP Alliance has come from, its vision, its aims, its values, and some of the work opportunities that we have been really fortunate to get probably pretty recently when I had arrived in May. So using today as a bit of an opportunity to build on that. So to bring some of the comments in that people made last time I was here. So to touch on the governance structure and how we've been building that. To talk a little bit about how that then includes Best Start in Life and the work that's been happening in that space, and updating some of the initiatives, and to also talk about the Children and Young People's Voice and Influence work that's been taking place and how that kind of threads and goes through all the things that we're doing. I'm really fortunate to be coming back again in May, so wanted to propose a little bit about maybe a bit more of a focus time when I come back in May, and to check that that's okay with everyone. So that's where I want to go, if that is all right. So next slide, please. So a bit about Best Start in Life. You will remember from last time I was here that I was just really excited to see Best Start in Life as part of the Integrated Care Partnership Strategy. That excitement has not left me. and it hasn't left our Children and Young People's Alliance members, which is made up of lots of partners. We're up to about 400 members now. It is a really key driver to have conversations in lots of different spaces about what we can do around this. And it's helpful just to remember those sort of larger ambitions in it, to make sure that we talk about and include children who are in care and support them to live good lives. We want to work with children, young people and families to ensure their voice, and we've spoken about that already, and it will come through some of the stuff that I'm saying today. The setting up of family hubs that's taken place, working to make sure that children who face inequalities get the same access, so equity of service and reducing those health inequalities, working across each of our places in those spaces and making sure that we work together in partnership with social care in terms of the help that's needed and that early access to help as well. So next slide, please. So I'm hoping that this next slide shows you a little bit about more of the system work that's happening to really dig into some of those high level statements that were in the bold ambition. Andy has spoken about safe space to sleep, but I put that in there because there's a real connection with the early years pilot work, which I mentioned last time I was here. So that's funding from NHS England. It's a similar type of approach, built slightly differently, but based on insights from communities about how they wanted to receive care and help and support in early pregnancy. So, and having that conversation that you've just had around evaluation, asking similar types of questions, getting similar types of feedback. So we want to, we know there's loads of evidence for years now saying that early intervention prevention is the way to go, and investment in children's services is the way to go. But what we need to do is really be able to share and make sure that there is common questions that we ask, in Alexa's point about all the different things that we're doing in this space, so that we're building an evidence base here as well to turn things around and think about that investment opportunity that will come out of it. So this is just to describe some of those things. I did mention to you about the Health Equity Collaborative. At that point, I think I talked about it in relation to Bernardo's and Health Institute, but now it is the Children and Young People's Health Equity Collaborative. It's evolved over time. That's working with Sir Michael Marmot, and he would actually say in this space, and he can because he's like amazing, but you know, he would say that we do this stuff because it's the right thing to do. And yes, it's great to have evidence and evaluate things and have research, but in reality, it is the right thing to do to make sure that children and young people, particularly who are experiencing inequalities, get the services that they need. And so I propose that I talk a little bit more about that framework that's been developed and the insights from children and young people and some data that we've been able to collect when I come back next time, because we're going to be looking at a system intervention in this space. It's a testing one, so it's not a new pilot, it's none of those things, it's just to test out the model of being able to think about service provision going forward. Next slide, please. So a little bit about the emerging governance system for the Children and Young People Alliance. I mean, what I'd really like to say is that, and I spoke about this last time, the Alliance is slightly different from some of the other spaces. It is about a movement. It's about people coming who choose to be part of the Alliance and a large membership of that. But it's also about creating space for people in a system when they're so busy and there is no time, and to be able to think about things that we want to be able to think about together to develop stuff. And the way that we've communicated and built the governance has come from members up. So it's been having a space for members, it's been having a space for collaborations of practice, and then we've built on that to have three different, I've bring these particularly because I think they're probably of most interest given our last conversation that we had. So there's something about being assured that the work that we're doing on the joint forward plan and the deliverables from NHS are being met for our system. And so we have a small assurance group that looks at that. We have now started to develop, and some of the members are in this room, which is great, a CYP Alliance strategic group, which will meet every quarter. It's for a longer meeting and has the opportunity to meet with people who lead strategically. For example, Rachel's agreed to come on board and have a conversation together about what's happening at place, what's happening at system, how do we make sure we keep connecting these dots, but also not just about the dots, it's how we keep driving forward in what we're doing, but it also made sense in terms of the bold ambition and a space to be able to hold what we're doing there and make sure that we're meeting our outcome measures and metrics and the larger pieces of work that are happening across the system. And then the other question was about that's fine, but how do we connect in with place partners? And so I'm fortunate to have a clinical director, Alicia Samson, who works in Barnsley some of the time. And so between us, we've reached out to different groups in each of our places. They're all called different things, but where partnerships meet to talk about children and young people and the strategies. And so we will attend them between us twice a year in those spaces. So hopefully that connects things up a bit better. And we'll see how we go. So we're just testing it out to see if that works and connects better. Thank you. Next slide. I won't get into this. This is just to give you a flavour of the different pieces of work that we're doing. Some, as I say, are deliverables. Some are projects and pilots, but it just gives you the breadth of work that's happening within the space. Next slide, please. Also a bit about interconnectivity and trying to really connect the dots with everything that's going on. When we go into different spaces, people will talk about what we're doing and say, but what about, or what about? And being able to look at this plan on a page and say, actually, do you know what, in that space, that bit's happening. And that bit connects to that bit has been really helpful. And there's more to do in that, but that's just to give you a bit of an overview of trying to connect the dots between place strategies and wider strategies. Next slide, please. CYP voice and influence, so important, particularly to myself, but to lots of people within the work that we're doing. That's a slide from our conference last year. So when I came, we had a conference about 4 weeks after that, and we had 180 people who attended in a space where we all know that this is a time where life is really difficult for people, not just the people that we serve, but the people that we work alongside. But what came out of this was they wanted to name it A New Hope, and it was just such a great way to frame what it is that we want to do and go in, because working in partnership for such a moment as this is the most important thing that we can do to drive change. And the launch pad of this conference, and the reason that I brought that up, is to take us into the next conference, which is coming up in the 30th of May, where we kind of pledged together as a group to say that we wanted to make sure that there were at least half of the delegates were children and young people in that space. So we're aiming at around 100 young people and 100 strategic leaders across our system to come into that space. We're doing well with the children and young people, not so well with the leaders, but I'll talk about that in a moment. So if you move on to the next slide, please. Thank you. A bit more about the stuff that's been developed in this space. I'll talk about the insights next time I come, because that's very much part of the health equity work. But what we have been able to do is partner with Chile Pep, and they have been able to do something that we would never be able to do, which is reach out to lots of different organisations that clearly drive forward the voice and participation work of children and young people in different spaces. So they've mapped as many people as they can, but what they then have done is invited them into one space. So we've had a couple of meetings, they're calling it Community of Practice, and I think up to about 30 organisations have been coming into that space to talk about how they share young people's experiences and then amplify them in the system. And that has just been amazing. And it builds on Kathy's point last time about how we have a framework to how to do this, to make sure that we get it through everything. And that's the second part. I'm kind of a doer before I do the strategy. So we're about to do that part soon, but that's where we've got to for that. And then you will see the little emblem there, young people leading change side by side, breaking cycles. Young people came up with that. That's a title for our conference. And that's very much how they see it. Let's do this together. Let's work together, hear what we have to say, and let's create something that's different. Let's break whatever it is that we're doing that isn't helping. Next slide, please. Oh, yes, so this is an invite. Just wanted to get a little voice from a young person in here. So if you press play, please.
Join us at the Breaking Cycles event and become part of driving forward change and improvement in services for children and young people.
We're inviting you to contribute to this and help create a positive impact in our communities.
Young people from across South Yorkshire are leading the way for change, and together we can help break those cycles. Don't miss this opportunity to motivate and encourage each other towards a better future for us young people. Thank you.
Brilliant. I like the statement of they're leading the way, which is great. So just wanted to plug the conference. Many of you will be invited to that, and it would be amazing if you could come. Next slide, please. Oh yeah, so we're nearly at the end. Recommendations, thanks. So thinking about the children and young people's approach to supporting best start in life and the governance that was shared, just checking that that's something that people are happy with. I would really love if it would be possible to invite 1 or 2 of the youth champions to join me in May. And also if we could support the engagement around the conference and share the word around, that would be fantastic. Thank you. And then thinking about the agenda for May, I've talked about the Child Health Equity Collaborative and thinking about the intervention. Been also involved in some work, particularly with adopters, and looking at a case for change for a multidisciplinary way of working with them. And I'd love to be able to talk about that a little bit more. And then we're leading up to, and Will's really doing this part, is a roundtable partnership discussion about children and young people and their big issues. And by then we will have been able to have a conversation with our chief execs in local places and local authorities and other people to just think about the big things that people are really struggling with right now around special educational needs, mental health, school absence, and talk about that together. And we'd like to bring some of those discussions to the space next time. Thank you.
Nicola, thank you very much. Any points we made? David?
Some very good points there, which I can totally support and agree with. But I do also have some points. This may not be what you're trying to do, but it comes across as this is a totally new movement, starting from the top, and there doesn't appear to be much thought of what's already happening on the ground in local councils. If I wasn't working in local council, I'd say, great, let's go with it now. But because I am, I just get the impression that not all the work that's going on in councils has been taken together. So it starts about setting up family hubs. Well, we've certainly got family hubs already and they're working well. So perhaps it should say continue to set up family hubs, etc., not setting them up because they're already there. I don't know about other authorities, but I know we have them in Rotherham. Also, I think there needs to be recognition that in some cases family hubs run under public health, not under children's services, although obviously they are linked with that. So I think it's important to build on what's already there, not something looking from scratch. So starting bottom up and work down. Again, totally agree with the listen to the voice of the children. I can only speak again for the one I know, Rotherham, but I'm sure the other councils may have the same. We already have a youth parliament. They already feed into a lot of things we do. So it appears in the way it was presented in the presentation. This is a totally new thing. They're already there. They're already impacting on our work. The Alliance Assurance Group. It needs people there with lived experiences from councils who are actually working in children's services, not people from the top or the technical level. Again, it needs to recognise that planning for children's services, for absentee rates, etc., that is down to local authorities. So again, it's more important to get those local authorities involved rather than saying, oh, we'll have this assurance company group that doesn't include that representation. Early years pilot. Well, I know we've been running early years for some time. I'm sure it's the same with the other ones. So why do we need a pilot? Why don't we see what the four councils are already doing and then build on that? I mean, perhaps that's what the pilot is going to do, but that's not what comes over. It looks like it's a totally new pilot. But have you looked at what we're all doing in early years work so far? So I think there needs to be more recognition of the work that CYPS is doing and working from the bottom to the top up. I'm sorry if I misunderstood what you're trying to say. I'm just saying that's the impression that's come over, that this is a brand new movement and ignoring everything the councils are already doing.
David, thank you.
I am really sorry if that's how it came across, because was absolutely not my intention at all. It really very conscious of all the work that's happening in place. So this is building on that. It's not about saying this is new. So yeah, not my intention at all for actually any of those points. And the way that the Alliance formed was from people at place who've come together to want to be able to share what they're doing together. and the Children and People's Voice work and collaboration of practice includes people that you've discussed, so the ambassadors and counsellors and all that thing from place, so they've all been invited. So I'm sorry if it came across as new, because that was not my intention.
Yeah, thank you. It's quite an interesting reflection, because I think what I was hoping was going to be taken from that is how we've tried to make sure that we connect things. So I think many times we've had discussions here about making sure that we are aware of the stuff that's already happening, so we can build on it, support it and enable it. And I think that's what Nick was trying to draw out. So the Safe Space to Sleep absolutely plugged into our family hubs, which absolutely are bottom up and within our local authorities. I think the worst case scenario would be we'd set up something different that wasn't connected, where we couldn't actually look at the multiple gains. I think that wasn't it. I just also wanted, Nick started off with reminding us that she came a year ago, and if we remember when Nick came, also we did hear from a number of our places as well, from so we could actually hear the work that was happening in 2 of our places, which was fantastic. And also I was mindful of the conference that that we went to, where all of our places, local authority, health partners and others were sharing all of that great work. So I think sometimes when you look at slides, they're a bit out of context, but I just want to contextualise that absolutely this is bottom up and connected, and just to give some reassurance to Councillor Roach, but also everybody else in the room, that absolutely is the case. And finally, I think I am a huge sponsor of the CYP Alliance, and I think one of the things that I've been most touched by is the energy and the enthusiasm, the commitment that there is from the people that work in this space. Actually, it's quite hard, because actually there are some inequities, huge inequities. But actually, I think when I first got involved, I think that the thing that really stands out for me is how well they've done some of that, really connecting bottom up. And I think that's what I hear mostly. And I wanted to reflect that in the room. I think it's important.
I think it is, Will. Thank you very much. Nigel.
Yeah, thanks, Piers. I think I tend to sort of like go along with quite a lot of what Councillor Roach has said. I mean, I'm not wanting to sort of like labour the point or sort of like go into a lot of detail, but over in Doncaster, I mean, just when 2010 come along, just this historical, but the vestiges of our family hubs and the connection service, in a lot of areas, particularly within South Yorkshire, we know that they weren't just abandoned, they continued in some shape or form. And we know in Doncaster that, we maintain some service along those lines to enable that almost cradle to adulthood service for young people. So we're particularly strong on voice and influence, and obviously we have our youth parliament and young advisors, and we still have some quite buoyant family hubs. Clearly, I mean, the presentation itself, I mean, to me, it's about, I suppose, gathering that understanding and linking in locally to inform. And for whatever reason, that's clearly not, come over in the slides, and I'm not, portioning blame on that. But I think certainly from my perspective, and I suppose Councillor Roach's, is that, we need to recognise good practice where it's happening locally. And what we need to do is to be able to sort of like share that across South Yorkshire. Now, I'm not saying for 1 minute that Doncaster's got everything right, and we've obviously got a lot to learn from in certain areas, from Barnsley and Rotherham, and certainly Sheffield. But I think there needs to be that recognition on that certain things we do very well, and secondly, we don't want to be reinventing the wheel in certain circumstances. So I think probably in future, when we're presented with something like this, it's probably a good idea that there is reference made to stuff that's already happening in certain local authorities and how that's functioning well already.
Thanks, Nigel. I've got Kathy on. Kathy, yeah.
Hi, Pierce. Hi, Nicola. I mean, I genuinely think, Nicola, that this is a phenomenal piece of work and demonstrates what you've achieved and what the Alliance have achieved collectively over the last year. On And I think what's really good about it is it has started to knit together the different elements of the system and some good practice that's happening right across the 4 places, but bringing it together at a South Yorkshire level and building consensus about what's important for children and young people. And I think the key thing that you've done with all of the members of the Alliance, because it's quite a vast group, is to establish that the most important thing we can do for and with children and young people is to listen to them and give them and make sure that they have a voice and that they're involved and are participating in shaping the future of health and care services across South Yorkshire going forward. So I think that we need to take that on board, if nothing else, the importance of listening, participation and involvement. So I would absolutely endorse your suggestion that children and young people attend the next session in May and communicate themselves some of what's important to them and what matters to them in all of this. I would ask that you bring not just 1 or 2 people, but a group of young people from different backgrounds from across South Yorkshire with different ages. And I'd also ask that we don't bring them into this environment, that we find a way to make sure that we create an environment where they can genuinely feel comfortable in telling us what's important to them as well. So we might change the environment to make sure that they make the best possible contribution that they can. And I would urge every single one of us as system leaders to attend the conference, because I think, again, that's a great forum to listen to all of those children and young people that you'll be bringing together from across South Yorkshire. It's a brilliant piece of work and really, really supportive of what you're doing.
Kathy, thank you, and I agree. It's excellent work. Helen, is it?
I think I'm just going to second what Kathy's just said, actually. So, yeah, but it's worth saying again, I do agree. I think it's great that actually you're focusing in on young people, and there's a lot of stuff happening. But in my experience of working with you are very good at sort of engaging broadly across the place. So I always welcome that approach that you take. And I think just to go a little bit further than Kathy's point, bringing young people in and into their spaces, actually having the conversations in their spaces is absolutely vital. So I think we need to think about how we can enable that and support that in going forward, but totally support everything you've said.
Thank you, David.
It's very critical. As I say, don't get the wrong impression. I'm very supportive of what's happening. It's a very good piece of work. I totally believe in listening to voices of our services, and those who are involved in adults will know that that's a key thing in the CQC assessment. So yes, it's important to listen to the voice of children, their experience, but we need to not to forget that the decisions are made by Cabinet, not by the children. So as we listen and we then take other things in mind, the final point I'll make is that I agree with you about how we listen to the children in the May meeting. And we wouldn't be making these sort of points if they were in the room, fairly obviously. And so, I don't think we need to worry about that. But can you please ensure that there are children from each of the 4 areas who are invited to that?
David, thank you. We'll pick that up. Okay. Can I thank you again? That's really, really important. Oh, sorry, Alexis, I'm sorry, I didn't see your hand raised. I apologize. Alexis.
Couple of things. First of all, when I was reading through the presentation, I think it's really helpful, and I think there's probably learning to be cascaded across other areas from this. I think there is, for me, is actually, I quite like the idea of actually the community of practice, and particularly putting young people's views and voices, at the centre of driving change. And if I do some analogies to like to some of the work that I'm involved in different partnerships, what we put is, for instance, people with learning disabilities voices at the centre of driving change, autistic people's voices, and I think for me there is something about how do we take some of the learning and also start to cascade that across, because I think it's really powerful and quite rich, actually, the community of practice. So for me, I think that'd be quite a good action to take from that. It's not just about the fact that this is happening, and it's actually how can we start to think about the learning and cascading and good practice. To me, I think there's something about that. And I think the second bit for me is, I was thinking about actually from young people through the life course. Young people become young adults who become adults. And for me, it's how do we actually start to think about that life course? and thinking about actually how do we take the learning, particularly from the young people's views, as they're becoming young adults, how can we start to embed this and learn from this, particularly for not for just adult services, but actually for across all the range of partners who work with young adults who become adults. And then having that kind of thought, then how do you become a community practice through the life course, for want of a better word, and to me, I think that's something quite powerful in that, because I often think about young people that I've spoke to who then become known to our services. I think it's still really important that the message has to be that their voice is really important and rich, and how we use their voices to shape and change, that strategic change. That doesn't stop if it means when they turn 25 for it, but so I think it's really powerful and important. And I suppose my final point is I would actually like to connect with you out with this, because there's a number of things that I'm saying that's happening within Sheffield. It's a sort of similar vein, and I think there is something about places, but there's also something about how you connect across in different ways. Okay.
Alexis, thank you again. Thank you for the work, Nicola. I like that presentation. That was great. Agenda item 7, which is Yorkshire Plan for Growth and Skills Strategy. Stephen, you take us through this.
Yes, I'm going to do that, and I'm going to do it briefly, really, which was reason we put this on the agenda was really just to flag with the board that these are two significant pieces of work which contribute directly to the bold ambition that we've got around the economy, and therefore to not acknowledge them in this board chair would have been slightly remiss, wouldn't it? So these are, like I said, two significant documents: the South Yorkshire Plan for Good Growth and the South Yorkshire Skills Strategy. Both of those were approved by SIMCA's board, i.e. the mayor, our chair, and the 4 local authority leaders in draft form last week, and were launched. And actually contribute enormously in terms of the work that we want to do, and therefore we don't exist in isolation, do we? We exist as a system, working collaboratively together for local authorities, SIMCA, and the NHS, and this is one example of where there's been some significant lifting by SIMCA and local authority colleagues in this space, which contributes directly to the work and ambitions of this board. Just a reminder of the bold ambition. We talked about working together to increase economic participation and to support a fairer, more inclusive and more sustainable economy. I know we all know those words, but actually it's worth just reflecting on that. And within that bold ambition, we talked about the absolute need to both reduce levels of economic inactivity across all places and all communities, and also to reduce the gap in employment rates as well. What we all know actually is good employment is a massive determinant of good health. And that's recognised in both these documents. These documents also recognise that good health is an absolutely massive determinant in us having a successful, thriving, prosperous and inclusive economy. And I think there's a figure knocking around that's suggesting that poor health is contributing to something like £3 billion of GVA gap. It certainly contributes to about 30% of our productivity gap and stuff like that. And I'm not going to go through the documents, more of it to acknowledge that these are significant milestones for us in terms of South Yorkshire, in terms of the delivery against that bold ambition. They are in draft form, so they'll be subject to further work in terms of consultation and delivery plans, but merely to say they are a significant milestone in terms of the work of this board, even though they sit outside of it. Okay.
Stephen, thank you. And I think that's right. I mean, it might not be directly on the bailiwick of this board. This is if we get jobs right, our health inequalities fall. These relationships are really clear, and it's important that we're at the very minimum cited on it. And I still think there's a question that says, and can we do more about it? Which I know is something we'll come on to. Any points people want to raise? Kathy.
The thing, I mean, they are both really important documents, and they have been absolutely co-created with the officers from each of the local authorities who look after jobs and skills and inclusive economy. But I think there's a piece of work for us to do, which is to knit together the work that's happening in each of the local authorities, so that we can collectively start to use the resources and the tools we have here to address the social determinants of health in a more joined up and coherent way. So there's something about how our work in health and care, links up with the housing sector, links up with the work we're doing around creating great neighbourhoods, connects with the work we're doing in skills more cohesively, and also really focuses on how we support people to get into, get on in and remain in work, because all of those things contribute to better health and well-being. So I think that's the work really that we need to do, almost as an alliance, focusing on the inclusive economy going forward. And Stephen put it very well in our session where we talked about this, where he said we need to kind of wire in and wire together the work at a local level on inclusive economy with the work we're doing around the social determinants of health at a South Yorkshire level.
Kathy, thank you. Alexis, sorry, Alexis first, sorry.
So again, really helpful paper and presentation and skill strategy. I think I'm just going to pick up on the last point I made. I think the last time we discussed this is, for me, what I'm quite keen to understand is how this will support particularly people with a learning disability, people, autistic people, and people with disability gain access to employment. Because I know from our data that's one of the highest risks of areas. And so for me at the moment, I can't see that connection. We've got some local work in Sheffield. I know that we've got some local work going on through our partnerships. And what I hear is that the ICB is leading it, but I'm not clear about where's the partnership. But so I think for me, I just need to understand here, is this an ICB-led focus, or is it an ICP, or is this a partnership across the 3 places? Because I think at the moment, I think we just need to be really clear. Because for me, what I'd want to see from this is actually this is a true partnership across each of the areas. And what I'd want to see is the impact, particularly on people with a disability, coming to the fore. Does that make sense? So because I'm just not, so apologies, I've not seen that being drawn out, but it is a challenge question I'm putting in because I'm not seeing it directly.
Thanks, Alexis. Do you want to just response to a quick response?
Let me have a quick go at that one, Alexis, which is a partial answer. So what I like about these documents is they're explicit about that point, particularly around the skills strategy. So it's in there, which is fine. That's why I'm partial. But secondly, I think it's now beholden upon us as a partnership to hardwire. Thank you for reminding me of that phrase, Kathy, to hardwire this in. And I think this is where the benefit of an ICP comes in, because in previous incarnations where you get economic strategies, you get them developed, close your ears, Kathy, by people who are involved in economic development, and therefore they don't necessarily bend into the sorts of questions that you just talked about. This strategy does, but it's still going to require people like ourselves to actually sort of hardwire that in place. So that's why it's a partial answer. I know I'm convinced you yet, but let me have another go at some stage, but not across this floor.
So I would quite like to have a follow on with this, because I think I'm thinking about particularly our data, which shows particularly, that's a key area of inequality of people with learning disability, autistic people, people with disabilities, and people experiencing mental health and more, and the data shows that that's a significant area of disadvantage. And it's not, I'm assuming, I know the Sheffield stats by the book, but however, I'm sure that's right across South Yorkshire. And although I see it in the strategy, for me, my granular level, I suppose I need to get more assurances. And I think I would welcome a conversation out with this as to how was that practically going to look like, and what does that practically look like? What's the funding behind it? What's the practical plans? What's the delivery plan? Because the strategy is great, but where's the delivery behind it? And I want to see that. What will that mean in terms of metrics? What will it mean in terms of outcomes for individuals? So that's what I'd really like to see, because I really welcome this. I'm not being, I'm being challenging, but I really welcome this. I think it's a great piece of work, but I think I need to see more detail behind it, so that actually I could be assured that the end of this will result in people with a learning disability, absolutely getting clear access to employment. People experiencing mental health have got access to employment and skills.
Thanks. Let's Helen.
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a whole range of things that have been done actually, and there's a lot of stuff that we know and that is being done around specific groups, around different kind of groups within a place, but also kind of a number of layers. There are also activities like the Yorkshire Policy Innovation Partnership that's looking at the inclusive economy and doing a quite a significant piece of research. I think it would just be great to think about how it all fits together and how we kind of bring all that learning together, because that's looking beyond the sort of growth narrative to a whole range of things that we could really sort of benefit from bringing into that discussion.
Thanks. But to me, this says that it's a really, really good strategy. Actually, there's something the ICP needs to do that says, if that's our strategy across South Yorkshire, agreed by the Mayoralty and the 4 local authorities, what are we going to do to contribute towards it? I think that's actually an important bit of work we should be thinking through. We've had some conversations about that, but I think that'd be really helpful. Stephen, thank you. Agenda item 8, the refreshed forward plan. Oh, sorry, Kathy, did you want to come in? I apologise. I have to be reminded.
No, it was just to say that I think it is an emerging piece of work, bringing together health and inclusive economy, and really making sure. And I don't think this is just about what the health and care sector can do for an inclusive economy. I think it's actually how a more inclusive economy can benefit the health sector through early prevention, etc. But I think there's a piece of work, as Helen said, to start bringing it closer together. And I think that's the work of the next couple of years, actually.
I agree. Thanks for that. Will.
Thank you, Piers. Kathy gave me the opportunity to come back in. I think it's that point about it's emerging, isn't it? And I think what we're doing is we're trying to illuminate, some really important things. I'm just mindful of the presentation and the folks that came to our last meeting. I'm just mindful of your challenge around learning disabilities, where we're really starting to understand the impact on people with learning disabilities, and they fare worse in this space, don't we? I think the bit that we've not managed to do yet, and I'm not sure the challenge is fair our combined authority to actually come up with all the answers. I think that's part of the work that we need to do, which is about looking at these things and thinking, how do they fit together, and then what we can do to affect some positive change. And I don't think we've done that yet, but the conversations are happening.
Sorry, I apologise, Chair. So thank you, Will. But I think the challenge is fair, actually, and I think actually one of the fall down points around strategies like this in the past is that we've been very good. I'm using the collective we here, have been very good at sort of like having very solid delivery plans around things like building out on innovation zones and the rest of it, but less solid on delivery plans in terms of the points that Alexis and Helen have made, and I think that's our challenge, really. So there's a bit of joining up here, but it's a legitimate challenge, actually. Yeah,
I agree. Okay, thank you. Really helpful conversation. I think those challenges are important as well. Refreshed forward plan. Mariana, is that you?
It is, thanks, Piers. I have got just a couple of slides, if it's okay, just to take you through some of the things that I shared ahead in the paper. So I thought it would be helpful to start with just to kind of refresh our thinking about the expectation around the NHS Joint Forward Plan. So this is a strategic 5-year plan that NHS partners, the ICB, together with our provider trusts, are expected to refresh annually. And if you remember, we had quite a detailed level of conversation towards the back end of last year around the development of our plan. The expectation is that the plan needs to set out how we will arrange and provide services that meet both physical and mental health needs, and that's in response to our understanding of our population health needs, so our joint strategic health needs assessment, that it aligned to our health and wellbeing strategies, the plans we've got in each of our places, so the health and care delivery plans, and that it will start to act as a shared delivery plan for our integrated care strategy. The expectation is that it will include how we will deliver against the NHS universal commitments. So they are the things that are set out in the NHS long-term plan, and that it will also help us to demonstrate how we're contributing towards the delivery of our core purposes as an ICS. So that is how we will improve population health, improve outcomes in healthcare and health, how we will address health inequalities, particularly thinking about inequalities in access, experience, outcomes, how we will make progress with respect to productivity and value for money, and then how we will also enable the NHS to contribute more in terms of that responsibility with respect to social and economic development. So we came together last year and we developed our initial joint forward plan for South Yorkshire. It was actually September time when we published that. And we were then asked by NHS England to refresh that, and we had updated guidance that landed in December. So if you'd just like to move to the next slide, please. So given that we published our plan in September last year, we were not anticipating that we would have a large number of significant changes in this initial refresh. And what we agreed is that we would take a light touch approach. We worked through our joint forward plan coordination group, which includes people from each of our place partnerships that are connected into our health and wellbeing boards. It also includes people from our alliances and our provider collaboratives. And we reviewed the guidance. We've also undertaken some work to refresh our needs assessment with the plans to publish that alongside the refreshed joint forward plan. We also engaged to think about the engagement approach. So we start to consider building on the approach we've taken. So if you remember for the integrated care strategy, we embarked on our What Matters to You campaign. And then we built upon that, didn't we, to undertake some work with health watchers to reach out to a number of our communities that we know we don't often hear from. And so that is how we informed the development of our initial joint forward plan. So we're keen to take a bit of a continuous approach. So what we've done is continue to work with our Health Watch colleagues to reach back out to those communities in order to share back with them how what they told us has influenced the plan. Also to have that conversation with them about how that engagement's feeling. And then actually some of the new areas that we identified to strengthen within our plan. We've been working with all of the leaders through our joint forward plan coordination group just to identify any areas with respect to strengthening and updating, ensuring that we're aligning that with the dialogue around our priorities for 24-25. And that's been the work that's been in discussions with our placers, our provider collaboratives and alliances. I think the bit that's probably been most live most recently has been the alignment with our annual operational plan and our financial plan. And then we shared an engagement draft at the end of February, and that was shared through our place partnerships with those that support our health and wellbeing board, so through our directors of public health and our local authority colleagues that support our health and wellbeing boards, with yourselves as members of the integrated care partnership, and then also with our joint health overview and scrutiny committee, and then directly with our kind of health watch partners. So we kind of shared broadly with that engagement draft, and that's the one that you will have received just ahead of the papers for the meeting today. So there aren't any, if you'd like to go to the next slide please, Max. So there aren't any significant changes in the plan as anticipated. What it does is really reaffirm the priorities that we identified in the plan that we talked through here last year. But there are some areas where we have further strengthened and refreshed. So if you'd like to go to the next slide, I'll just focus on those areas. So we've refreshed our joint strategic needs assessment. It now also includes more detail with respect to how we're developing our plans to address women's health issues. There's a strengthened focus around palliative and end-of-life care, the work that we've done together to develop our strategy and look at how we translate that into action plans. There's a strengthened focus around how we work more collaboratively with respect to tobacco control. And if you remember, that was something that we discussed here at the Integrated Care Partnership, so we've kind of translated that into the refresh of our joint forward plan. There's an increased focus on outcomes. So there is now a link in the document that takes you to our publicly available outcomes framework. What I will say is that is absolutely work in progress, but we wanted to kind of demonstrate the progress in that space. We're also more explicit in the refreshed joint forward plan about the direction of travel we're expecting each of those outcomes to be moving in. A number of areas we have refreshed our case studies, so some of the prevention case studies, the digital case studies, so there's a focus on how the work in our digital services looking at how we support primary care access. We have updated some of the things that we've made significant progress around, so things like the opening of some of our elective hub developments, the expansion of our diagnostic centres, we've actually refreshed those in there. And we've worked quite closely with our place colleagues to ensure that we have got the linkages with our place health and care delivery plans, so you can actually connect directly through to those plans from the joint forward plan document. So in terms of next steps then, if you'd like to do the last slide for me, please, Mags. Ensuring alignment with our NHS operational planning requirements and our financial plan. So we have submitted our initial plan for next year today, and so that's been very live in terms of ensuring the alignment there. Key next steps is considering the feedback. So the refresh was discussed at the ICB board earlier in March, and a number of areas were identified there. We've had some good feedback from our Health Watch colleagues over the last week, so we'll be working through that. So a key next step is considering the feedback from all of those partners, including yourselves today. And then we'll be looking to finalise the refreshed joint forward plan for 24-25 so that we can share that online by the end of March.
Right, thank you. Chris.
No, thanks, Ryan. It's really helpful. Just in terms of engagement, this is with my Rotherham hat on, and my councillor Roach might actually say this, but I might say it first. So in terms of engagement, we tried our best to try and fit in with the timescale. So it went to our place board yesterday, but it did cause some logistical issues with our health and wellbeing board because we meet 4 or 5 times a year, don't we? So it didn't necessarily fit in. So we're trying to engage and do things virtually, just to flag up in terms of engagement with health and wellbeing board. It may be a case of getting initial feedback, and then when we formally meet, we might have to do it in a slightly different way. So we have to be agile when we deal with the health and wellbeing board.
Yeah, Chris has made one point to make, but I also wanted to say that, I'm really impressed with what you've done there, Marianne and your team. It's really good. I particularly like the emphasis on prevention, tobacco control, and hopefully that will also include vaping, but I'm sure it will do. And also the need for data, etc. I've also sort of been mentions to GSNA. We, at the moment, as I understand it, there are the 4 GSNAs, but it would be nice to see, is it possible to somehow get a South Yorkshire GSNA as well? Well, I think that'd be very useful to all. So totally support what you're doing, and I'll take on board the point that Chris made as well.
Thank you. Mariana, do you want to come back?
Lovely, thanks for that, Chris. I think equally we've had challenges across with respect to ensuring that we've been able to share things through health and wellbeing boards. So we absolutely welcome that kind of virtual, flexible approach. We took a bit of time, didn't we, last year, so that health and wellbeing boards have been through the main contents of the plan, and there aren't a lot of changes in this version. In terms of your kind of latter question there, I think we absolutely do have a South Yorkshire Joint Strategic Needs Assessment, and what I have done, I think it was a little bit hidden in the previous draft, if I'm honest, David. So what I've done this time is try to make sure that's more explicit, and there's an area on the website where we'll publish that, so you'll be able to click straight through to the link from a South Yorkshire perspective and see that Joint Strategic Needs Assessment.
Any other points? Mariana, thank you very much. Oh, sorry. Nigel. Sorry, Nigel.
No, it's fine. It's just a quick one on this, just Mariana, just in terms of obviously the engagement. I mean, we know previous engagement's been quite problematic in terms of percentage reaches across South Yorkshire. My guess is you're going to be keeping a tally on that. You'll be able to let us know how that progresses. Is that the case?
That's a really good question, that, Nigel. So we're trying to build in it being part of our continuous approach. But you're right, when we kind of did our initial integrated care strategy, we went to a lot of effort to reach out. But obviously, at times it's challenging to kind of gain feedback around things that are so strategic and broad. So if the board are interested, then I think what would be really helpful is to kind of connect this into the work that we're doing to involve to develop our ICB start with people strategy. And I know that Katie came here, didn't she, to talk about the approach to that. So maybe that would be something that the board would like to hear a little bit more about, in terms of, because we've aligned those 2 bits of involvement, because it's about how we develop a continuous ongoing approach, isn't it, rather than a one-off kind of conversation.
I think that we did talk about it at the last meeting. It might be helpful to come back again and just say where we are as an ICB. That's technically ICB rather than ICP, but yes.
A group of willing volunteers, and some of them are here, continue to meet to support the ICP. Just 3 things really. You remember we talked about Research and Innovation Showcase. That was one of the things that was discussed. I just wanted to signpost that to the potential for that being in September of this year, and that absolutely is about involving across all of our places, all of our organisations, really wide reach, essentially showcasing the great work that we're doing across South Yorkshire. The other thing we talked about is some ambitions for some focus roundtables around housing and health. So that's a really good discussion, some really great focus sessions there. So just wanted to cite on that conversation. And obviously we'll bring, as it starts to evolve, it'll come to the ICP obviously for full discussion. And then Barbara Coyle, who's been developing our outcomes framework, but also has been working with Katie Davidson on the broader insights, and that's about engaging with our knowledge steps to make sure that we're getting the broader range of insights to underpin our work, so that we know that we're focused in the right areas. And so she's been actually helping connect that into the Bold Ambitions work, so that's underpinned quite well. Just those three things. Thanks.
I'm going to be as brief as possible. And it's not necessary to start discussion today, because I think this would be the wrong place, particularly as we haven't got much time left at all. And I do know that it's down on the agenda for the main meeting. If I can set some context. First of all, the South Yorkshire Health and Wellbeing Boards meet regularly together, sometimes with ICS officers as well. And it's a good, strong partnership. And I say sometimes we also invite the directors of public health and etc. And we've recently been going through some training with the LGA, and when we said that we have a very strong partnership, they said to us clearly, well, that's fine, but that means to be able to criticise positively. And so I wanted to make it absolutely clear that I'm not speaking by myself, that all the points I'm about to make were at a joint chairs meeting, and I do know that some of the people in Rotherham also agree with the points I'm going to make. So first of all, mention has been made of health inequalities, which is the key driver of health and wellbeing boards. Added to that, one of the key functions of the health and wellbeing boards is to reduce those health inequalities, and also it's one of the key functions of the ICP. We've heard very little about that over all the time the ICP has been developing. Yes, we've had some issues that have been raised today with the Children's Board, but what we've had is a lot of topics on job creation, etc. That's important, as was said earlier on in the meeting, in terms of creating wealth, having to reduce health inequalities. But there's far more in health inequalities than that. So what I'd like to do is to make a couple of recommendations, which no, rather than have a long discussion about it now, we can discuss these at the next meeting. First of all, that I propose that we develop a system whereby we can all have an input into the agenda. I was talking to Chris earlier on today, and what we do in Rotherham, I'm sure other people do it too. We have a draft agenda for our health and wellbeing for the whole of the year. Now, if that was available, it is draft, because obviously we don't know what's going to come up suddenly. Then people could say, okay, can we feed in this into the agenda or that into the agenda? So that would be a good way to make sure more people can contribute to what's going to be on the agenda. And I'd also like to suggest that we need to look at communications between us all, and also what comes to this board in the sense of talking to colleagues. We'd really like to know what some of the other boards are doing, for example, subgroups are doing. So, for example, fully aware there's a suicide group. Well, fairly obviously that comes into the ICP. But it'd be nice just to have a feedback on some of the work they're doing. And as the agenda item next month, I understand it's about health and wellbeing boards, I think it's important that all 4 health and wellbeing boards, not just 2 of them, have a chance to cooperate. Now, it may sound like I'm starting discussion here, but certainly all I'm saying is that we could, the ICS officers consider a way that we can all involve ourselves and set the agenda. That agenda reflects more health inequalities. And what I've also, what the joint chairs are also proposing is a meeting, we've already asked for this, between all 4 chairs of the health and wellbeing boards with senior ICS staff, so we can clear up some of this, these points before the meeting on May the 20th, and therefore we can make sure that although nothing will be agreed on in that closed shop meeting, at least it will be a chance to see how do we all move forward together. So I just want to be absolutely clear, the 4 health and wellbeing boards are committed to ensuring that ICP is highly successful and becomes the best one in the land, if not the best one in the world. But as I say, we just feel there are just a few things that can make it better, including the agenda setting and including just clearing up some issues. So I didn't mean to start a discussion today. That'll be far better at the closed shop meeting if it can be arranged, and also on May the 20th.
David, thank you. I'm sure we can arrange that, and we will make sure that happens. Stephen, you and I make sure that's a bit of a in our bailiwick, okay? Okay, brilliant. But before we finish, I wanted to thank you, David. This is David's very last meeting. I suspect not just here, but nearly anywhere, by the way, given that we're going into Purda next week. So at a very personal level, I wanted to thank you for your commitment here, which is unwavering. I've never known a man give me such a conscience being on my shoulder regularly and consistently, probably as you, David. But genuinely, I think your commitment to health and well-being in Rotherham and beyond is extraordinary. You will be missed, and I mean that genuinely. So good luck. Thank you very much for your time and effort. God bless.
I'm open to
Alexis, you wanted to say something?
Apologies. Just a couple of AOBs. I've just had to ask us at a future agenda if we could perhaps have a couple of items around changing futures, which is a programme to tackle multiple disadvantage, but also we recently launched the Royal Foundation's Homeless programme last week, which is about tackling end homelessness. It's a great programme, and I think there's something about the learning and cascading across South Yorkshire about how we support people experiencing multiple disadvantage and also ending homelessness. And so I think we'd raised it here before, but I thought we'd raise it again as a request for an agenda and perhaps as a focus session, and you know, and we think about that, particularly as an area of, I think, of something that cascades, not only obviously it's an area of relevance for Sheffield, but I think it's also about how we think about that across South Yorkshire and the learning that we could take collectively together.
Despite the impression that I sometimes give, I really have enjoyed being on this board. It's done some great work. I'll miss you as well.